She leaned against the bedroom doorway like it was a casual question, but I could see it in the set of her shoulders, the rehearsed calm, the careful pause before she spoke. "If we're solid," she said, her half-smile calculated to look effortless, "you'll trust me no matter where I go tonight." I didn't flinch. I just met her gaze and smiled. Of course. That was the last time she saw my eyes up close. She kissed me lightly on the cheek, more performance than affection, grabbed her overnight bag and vanished into the Friday dusk. Her perfume lingered in the hallway longer than she did. I stood there for a moment after the door clicked shut, then turned off the hallway light. We had argued less lately. That was the strange part. Less friction, but also less contact. Like she'd found a better tactic than confrontation, one that didn't risk giving me anything to push back against. We still had dinners. We still laughed sometimes, but I'd started to notice the absences, the missing hours wrapped in vague words like solo recharge or mental reset. It was 3 weeks earlier when she introduced the growth model, as she called it. I'd walked into the living room after a long day and she was already waiting, laptop open, article pulled up like a visual aid. She said it was about radical trust, about how modern couples thrive when they each have unmonitored freedom. Not checking locations, not questioning alone time, she'd said, eyes bright with the thrill of discovery. It's about space without suspicion. I'd nodded slowly. I didn't argue. She hadn't framed it as a request, more like a boundary she was establishing. It wasn't a discussion, it was a pitch. And by the time I realized what she was really selling, the contract was already signed in silence. That night, the night she left with that line still hanging in the air, I didn't follow her, didn't text. Didn't check any locations. I honored the rules she'd written, but I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark listening to the refrigerator hum and the radiator tick, feeling the quiet eat into me. Something didn't feel like trust. It felt like bait. I didn't panic, didn't spiral. I started with something simple. The next morning, after she came back smiling like she'd done nothing but sip chamomile tea in a hotel robe, I logged into the streaming account we both used. She always left a trail there. Always forgot that shared access meant shared history. That's when I saw it. A new profile had appeared, created 2 weeks prior. The name was meaningless, generic, but the watch history wasn't. Romance films, every one of them. Each one watched late on Friday nights, the same nights she'd been proving our trust. It wasn't definitive, not yet, but it was enough to crack the frame of her narrative. I didn't ask, didn't confront, just kept smiling when she leaned over the couch to kiss my cheek. I'd already learned, if someone insists trust means not looking, it usually means they've hidden something worth seeing. I stopped sleeping fully after that. I moved through our mornings like a man carefully studying a crime scene that hadn't been officially declared. Her coffee still steamed in the French press. Her playlist still played. But it all felt like someone impersonating peace. And I didn't blink. She wanted a trust test. I decided to pass it, with silence sharp enough to cut her script in half. I waited 4 more weekends before touching anything else. Not because I wasn't sure, but because I needed to be. I knew enough to feel the rot under the floorboards, but I needed to know how deep it went before I started pulling them up. That Saturday she was humming while folding laundry. Her phone lit up with a message she ignored too quickly. I didn't ask. I offered to grab dinner. She said she needed the night for herself again, said it in a soft, practiced tone like it was part of her therapy homework. I nodded, said nothing. By midnight, the streaming profile had logged another watch, same genre, same timestamp range. I clicked into the profile and checked the location match through the IP record stored on the backend. Most people forget those logs exist. She certainly had. Downtown. A luxury hotel on 9th and Sycamore. One I recognized because we'd celebrated our first anniversary there. This wasn't a one-time escape. This was a ritual. I pulled up their website, created an account, ran a search through the past 30 days under her name. Nothing. Then I tried her secondary email, the one she used for online orders and flight deals. She once used it to sign up for a loyalty program and forgot I was copied on the confirmation. There it was, 4 weekend bookings, same room type. Same timestamp windows as the streaming viewings. I didn't even need to look at the full guest list. The pattern had already become the proof. I printed it, quietly. On the office printer she never used, filed it with the rest of the paper trail I'd been collecting since the new profile appeared. I didn't label the folder, just slid it into the back of a locked drawer under old tax files. That Sunday she came back early. Hair damp, eyes bright like she'd done something cleansing and noble. She brought croissants and asked if I wanted coffee. She curled beside me on the couch like we were still fused at the core. I played my role, smiled, kissed the top of her head. "Good night," I asked, keeping my voice casual. She laughed softly. Healing felt like clarity. I nodded and passed her the remote. The next clue came midweek. She posted a photo on her story, just flowers in a hotel vase deliberately blurred. The caption read, "Healing in real time." No faces, no tags. But I recognized the lamp behind the bouquet. Same as the ones in the suite I'd found on the hotel website. I didn't comment, didn't reply. She later posted a photo of the croissants, said, "Grateful to be loved while doing the work." A few mutual friends liked it. I wondered what kind of work involved duplicate bookings, hidden email confirmations, and a performance schedule of vague self-discovery quotes. I wondered if the romance movies were a coincidence or just a way to soften the edges of what she already planned to justify. I didn't push, just observed. That was the first time I saw it clearly. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a mistake she tripped into and hoped I wouldn't notice. This was a framework she'd constructed, a structured deception under the banner of growth. She wasn't asking for freedom. She was asking for clearance. And I was giving her all the rope she needed, not to hang, but to reveal exactly how far she'd stretch it when she thought no one was watching. The line between ignorance and permission gets blurry when you play along long enough. I begun to see that she wasn't just betraying me, she was scripting it, scripting me. Every step I took to stay calm, every quiet nod I gave, she logged it as validation. I wasn't just her partner anymore. I was a character in a redemption arc she was drafting alone. The illusion cracked wider 2 Fridays later. That afternoon, a courier dropped flowers at our building, white lilies and eucalyptus. I saw the envelope first. No return name, just a card addressed to her with a typed message. "Love how you're showing up for yourself." I watched her open it at the kitchen island, her reaction just off enough to register. A flash of surprise, not at the gift, but at the delivery. She hadn't expected it to arrive during daylight. I said nothing. She let the envelope slide off the counter and made a quiet show of rearranging the stems in the vase we kept for anniversaries. When she caught me looking, she smiled like it was a joke we were both in on. "A client thing," she said with a shrug. "Team appreciation." I nodded. Didn't ask which client sent romantic florals with self-love notes. She seemed relieved I didn't pry. That relief told me everything. By then, I'd set up silent alerts. Her second email pinged a few hours later, a confirmation from a courier service. Order processed. Delivery confirmed. The sender address was hers. She sent herself the flowers. I reread the message. "Love how you're showing up for yourself." It wasn't just staged. It was pre-cleared misdirection, performance wrapped in affirmation. She wasn't trying to get away with something. She was trying to sell it, rehearsed grief for a crime she was already committing. Later that evening, she posted again. A story with a slow zoom on the lilies, blurred music in the background, some lyric about learning to breathe alone. The caption, "Some healing is silent." No one else was in the frame, but she didn't need them to be. The absence was part of the pitch. She was crafting a digital elegy for a relationship she hadn't officially left, one she hadn't even confessed to damaging yet. And still, she wanted sympathy in advance. I didn't comment, didn't share, just watched. The next day I found the message. A screenshot forwarded from a mutual friend who didn't know what side of the line she'd landed on yet. It was from her, dated a week back. "Worst case, he gets mad. Then we rebuild trust. I get credit for honesty." It didn't read like fear, it read like planning. She was counting on the blow up. The classic explosive confrontation, tears, regret, vows to grow, maybe even therapy. She mapped it out like a cycle. I was supposed to rage, she was supposed to weep, and then we'd start the trust game again with new rules she'd quietly tailor to fit the next infraction. But I hadn't exploded. I hadn't even reacted. That's what shook her. When she sent her usual 7:03 p.m. check-in, "Still love me." I let the notification sit unread. No dot, no reply, not even a flicker of engagement. I wasn't withholding love. I was removing the stage. She hadn't planned for that. She wasn't prepared for a man who wouldn't play the part she'd written. And somewhere in that silence I felt something subtle shift. Not freedom exactly. Not yet, but gravity reversing. Her orbit was beginning to decay, and I didn't have to touch a thing. By the following weekend she looked less radiant when she left. Not disheveled, never that, but more studied. As if she'd rehearsed her exit in front of a mirror, unsure which smile would still land. She wore the same coat she'd worn during our anniversary trip. I wondered if that was intentional or if she'd simply forgotten what that coat used to mean. She said she was going to recharge. I said, take your time. No warmth, no sarcasm, just smooth neutrality. She tilted her head slightly, maybe registering the flatness. But she didn't ask. She left anyway. That night I canceled the dinner reservation she didn't know I'd made for our anniversary, just to see if she'd remember. She didn't. The table for two at Florence's downtown came and went, empty and unnoticed. She didn't text until 7:14 p.m. Her message came in like clockwork, soft-pitched and purposefully ambiguous. Still love me. I looked at it for a long time. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wanted to feel how little it hurt not to send one. I let the screen go dark. That was the first night I didn't stay home. I didn't follow her either. I went to a quiet wine bar on the east side, sat at a booth where no one knew me, and just listened to the way strangers talked to each other. Some flirty, some tired, some working through something heavy without saying it directly. I wondered how many of them were pretending the way she'd been pretending, building stories they hoped others would believe. She came back late or maybe early. I never asked. I was already asleep, or at least faking it convincingly. In the morning, she moved through the apartment with exaggerated care, setting mugs down gently, not talking much. She waited until noon to say anything. "Are you okay?" she asked from the hallway, her voice casual but fishing. I didn't look up from the article I was reading. "Great, actually." She stood there for another second before walking off. The next day, she went live. No warning, no context, just her, staring into the phone screen like she wasn't sure who she was trying to reach. Her voice was low, softened by false sorrow. "Some people don't value growth," she said. It was vague, designed for plausible deniability. She didn't name me, didn't describe the supposed conflict, but her tone made it clear this was the heartbreak part of the script. This was the scene where she tried to frame the silence as cruelty rather than consequence. Only the comments didn't follow her lead. Someone posted, "Didn't you post a whole other man last week?" Another, "Healing in real time." With hotel flowers, the comments picked up speed, not in waves but precise darts. She ended the stream early. I didn't bring it up. I simply noted the tremble in her hand when she picked up her coffee the next morning. Her phone stayed face down more often. She flinched once when I walked into the room without sound. The pressure wasn't mine to apply. She debuilt her own collapse. Every step she'd taken with confidence had been built on the assumption that I'd react predictably, that I'd rage, that I'd scream and beg and then finally forgive. She was counting on the confrontation to validate her pre-written guilt arc, but I gave her nothing. And in that vacuum, her entire strategy turned inward. She hadn't rehearsed this version where I didn't fight to stay, didn't beg to understand. She staged the deception, framed it as growth, dared me to pass the trust test. I had. And now, in the quiet I left her with, she was finally realizing what that silence meant. Not distance, not indecision, just done. I found the file by accident. It was buried in a cloud folder. We both used to manage travel itineraries and shared home documents, mostly boring stuff like receipts, warranty PDFs, moving checklists. I hadn't looked there in weeks. Not until I saw her flick open her laptop one evening, then slam it shut the moment I walked into the room. She smiled too quickly afterward, reached for her tea like nothing happened. So that night, while she took a long bath with her calming playlist on full volume, I logged in from my phone, navigated straight to the cloud. Her last modified folder was titled innocently enough, Journal Reflections. Inside, one file stood out immediately. No date, no cover note, just a simple title, Phase 2 Post-Test Messaging. My breath slowed as I opened it. The first line read like a stage direction. If he finds out, tears optional but helpful. Avoid direct contradictions. Say it wasn't romantic, but don't firmly confirm either. Beneath that, bullet points. Frame it as part of the test, not a betrayal. Use language about confusion, inner healing, disorientation. Emphasize that no boundaries were broken because none were clearly set. Say, this was about me, not about us. Avoid blaming. Let him offer that narrative himself. If he walks out, say, I understand. Cry second, not first. There were more, too many more. She de-written it like a crisis comms memo, preemptive, structured, impersonal. This wasn't a woman spiraling in emotion. This was planning, insurance. She hadn't stumbled into confusion. She de-designed a full story arc with a recovery phase already in place, complete with emotional cues and fallback phrases. I copied the file to an encrypted drive. I didn't confront her. I couldn't, not yet. She needed to believe the script was still viable, that her soft sighs and artful silences still held sway. She didn't notice anything had changed, but I had. That night I lay in bed while she curled toward me, sighing softly like she wanted to be held. I let my arm rest near her but didn't move closer. Her fingers grazed my chest. I stayed still. You've been distant, she whispered, trying to invite the scene she'd planned. Are we okay? I kept my voice quiet. You're the one who wanted space. She didn't respond. Just stayed pressed against me a little too long, waiting for me to cave, for me to flip to the page in her script that called for reconciliation. But I had seen the director's notes. I knew exactly how many takes she'd rehearsed for this. I wasn't going to give her the scene. The next morning she brewed coffee and left a pastry by my laptop. No note, just another quiet offering, another test. I took the coffee, threw the pastry out, and began the next stage. I changed the login credentials on every joint tool we shared, transferred key files out of our shared cloud space, set up an alert system through my financial advisor. It wasn't dramatic, it was methodical. She wanted freedom, so I gave her mine. She was still smiling at the mirror, still pretending the story was hers to control. But the script was mine now, and the next scene didn't need her lines. I moved slowly because I had time. That was the difference between reaction and strategy. She thought she'd push me into a corner, into silence as punishment. But silence wasn't the absence of action, it was the camouflage for it. The first step was the condo. We were co-listed on the lease, but she hadn't noticed that I'd initiated a full ownership transfer 3 weeks ago. Not a new lease, a buyout. Quiet, clean, and private through a trust name she didn't recognize. I filed the paperwork using a third-party agent in a different state. No drama. Just the quiet shift of real estate into autonomy. By the time she left for another Clarity weekend, the documents had cleared. I was now sole owner. The locks would change next. She didn't ask questions when she returned. Maybe she sensed something had shifted, maybe not. She was too busy maintaining the illusion of natural rhythm, cooking again, offering back rubs, watching the same shows she used to ignore. I let her pretend. That was part of the play. The second step was financial. She still had access to shared drive folders for budget spreadsheets and account summaries. I'd long since migrated the real versions. Every trace of joint access was scrubbed. Credit card authorizations revoked. The emergency travel card I'd let her carry, just in case, had already been disabled. I left the card in her wallet to avoid suspicion. The decline would come later. By Thursday, I began untangling social links, removing her access to the household calendar, canceling subscriptions tied to our joint usage, and initiating a full digital disconnection. But I still hadn't confronted her. She didn't deserve confrontation. She deserved absence. It was a Tuesday when she finally broke the pattern. I was finishing dinner alone at the counter when she sat across from me with a studied expression. One part confusion, one part wounded curiosity. I feel like I'm losing you, she said, and I don't understand why. Her voice trembled on the last syllable, not because of sincerity, but because she expected a moment of emotional negotiation. Her script had reached the vulnerability bait page, the page where the man she'd fractured starts to plead for understanding. I didn't give it to her. You wanted freedom, I said. I'm honoring that. She blinked, sat back. not sure if I meant it as sarcasm or surrender. I didn't mean from you, she said, quieter. I meant for me. That's exactly what I mean too. The silence after that wasn't empty. It was filled with all the words she was scrambling not to say. She wanted me to ask what happened. To ask about the hotel, the streaming profile, the staged flowers, the fake narrative she'd posted online. She was dying for a line she could pivot into guilt reduction. I never gave her one. That night, while she pretended to read a book on the couch, I finalized the removal of her authority from our lease's utility contracts. I forwarded the new trustee designation for the condo account to my legal rep. I wasn't just preparing to leave. I was preparing to live without any trace of her tethered to my name. She built a world where betrayal came wrapped in therapy language and false empowerment. But I had no interest in punishing her. I was simply letting the weight of her choices fall on her, without cushion, without counter-narrative. She hadn't realized that silence could be the loudest severance. And I was still smiling, not with forgiveness, with clarity. The unraveling began online, exactly where she had built her safest version of the story. 3 days after I severed the last digital tie, she went live again. No music this time, no filters. Just her in the dim light of the bedroom she hadn't realized was no longer hers. She looked pale, not from grief but from uncertainty. There's a difference. Some people, she began, her voice low and vaguely tremulous, don't know how to handle change, a pause, and when they feel threatened by growth, they shut down, they disappear. Her eyes searched the camera like it owed her a reaction. The comments started slow. A few hearts. A few affirmations from the people who didn't know her well enough to question anything. But then came the drop. Didn't you post a guy's hand in your story 2 weekends ago? Is this about the healing weekend with the flowers you sent yourself? Then someone posted the kicker. Didn't you write a whole checklist for damage control, asking for a friend? I knew then that the file had leaked. Maybe the friend who'd forwarded it to me finally snapped. Maybe someone else she confided in had gotten tired of playing PR manager for a story that kept shifting. Whatever the reason, it was too late for her to contain. She paused the stream, tried to pivot. This isn't about specifics, she said, more rushed now. It's about how we process when we're let down, when people we trust act like strangers. Someone posted, he didn't act like a stranger, he acted like someone done being played. She stared at the screen for too long. Then she ended the stream. She didn't post again that night, or the next. In the silence that followed, I closed out every remaining shared connection. Unlinked our utilities from autopay, removed her phone from the security account. I left the profile up on the streaming account though. Let her see the empty watch history and the locked settings. Let her see how thorough I'd been. 2 mornings later, she asked me quietly at the kitchen sink, "Are we okay?" She looked tired, not broken, just shaken by the absence of control. I tilted my head slightly. "Depends what you mean by we." She tried to smile, but it faltered. "I mean, are we still us?" I didn't respond, just took my mug, walked past her, and left the room. That evening she came home to find her name removed from the parking garage list. The concierge stopped her and asked for ID. She had none. She called me, but the call never rang through. Her number was muted now. She left a voicemail. "I don't understand what you're doing. If this is about the trust test, I thought we agreed it was growth." I didn't reply. She didn't know yet that I'd already signed the final paperwork on the condo's sale. The funds were secured, split according to a structure that didn't require her consent. I had handled everything before the first staged flower ever arrived. All that was left now was the exit. And her story, her neat, curated, carefully staged narrative, was collapsing not with a scandal but with a whimper. Because without conflict she had nothing to post. Without my anger she had no audience. She hadn't anticipated silence being this loud, and it was only getting louder. She deleted her account the next morning. No announcement, no apology post, just vanished. The same way she used to disappear on weekends and call it healing. But unlike before, there was no return. The checklist had spread faster than I expected. A mutual friend forwarded me a group chat thread she'd been in, one where her closest defenders had once gathered. Now it was full of silence, interspersed with hesitant questions. One friend had written, "So, Was any of it real? Another. Did she actually plan the whole thing in case she got caught? And then, inevitably, why would she expect to be forgiven for something she architected? That one hit hardest. She hadn't just misled people, she'd insulted them. She hadn't trusted their loyalty enough to tell them the truth, and now they didn't trust her enough to hear her side. Not after the screenshots. Not after the hotel records. Not after they saw the file, the literal bullet points of her planned redemption. I hadn't leaked it. I hadn't needed to. She did this to herself. That weekend, I saw her parked across the street. She didn't come to the door, didn't try to talk. Just sat in her car for nearly half an hour. I watched from upstairs. Lights off, blinds tilted just enough. I could see her gripping the wheel, staring at the building like it might explain something she still didn't understand. Then she drove off. That was the last time I saw her in person. I left the condo a few days later, final walkthrough complete, keys handed off to the agency managing the transition. She wasn't on any of the documents. She'd been so busy building her freedom space that she never noticed I was quietly cutting every tether. I moved into a small place in the West End, smaller footprint, higher view, clean slate. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night. No vague weekend plans. No artfully vague captions to decode. No wondering whether a romantic movie watched on a strange profile meant what I knew it meant, just stillness. I didn't block her number, I didn't need to. I knew she would try once more. It came on a Tuesday. Simple, plain. So that's it, just gone, delivered. Never read. She had framed her betrayal as a test. A necessary challenge. She deconvinced herself that if I reacted with anger, she'd regain control through forgiveness. If I broke, she'd get to rebuild me under the conditions she needed. But I hadn't broken. I'd simply walked away. She expected to manage the fallout. I gave her nothing. And without someone to perform for, the entire act dissolved into dust. She had asked for trust. I gave her the cleanest proof of it I could. The silence that only comes from a man who's finally, completely, and absolutely done. I thought there would be more pain once it was final. Some pang of regret. A pull toward the memories of what used to be. Sunday mornings, inside jokes, the way she used to tuck her feet under me when we watched late-night documentaries. But what I felt was closer to clarity. Not relief exactly, more like gravity lifting. The fallout had come and gone without ever needing my voice. Her social circle had fractured. The friends who had once clapped under her Instagram posts now watched in silence. The checklist had rewritten her image more thoroughly than anything I could have said. She tried to control the story. In the end, it was the facts that told it. I stayed quiet through all of it. No posts, no vague statuses, no counterclaims. When someone reached out, a former coworker, a friend who'd gone quiet for months, I kept my words simple. We ended, it wasn't healthy. That was enough. I didn't need allies. I wasn't building a case. I was rebuilding a life. A month passed, then two. She tried again once. A long email, no subject line. Just a wall of text so carefully worded it read like a TED Talk monologue. She spoke about growth, about fear, about not knowing how to express her needs and making complex choices. She didn't mention the hotel, didn't mention the file, didn't mention the man who appeared in the blurred reflection of one photo someone managed to screenshot before she deleted it. Instead, she wrote about healing, again. I read the first paragraph, then deleted it. Closure wasn't hers to give. She had made her choices. So had I. One afternoon, I walked past a cafe we used to visit. It was the place where we once spent hours planning a life, where she used to trace circles on my palm and talk about trust like it was a shared fortress instead of a stage cue. I paused briefly, not out of nostalgia, just to measure the distance between who I was then and who I had become. I didn't go inside, didn't need to. That night I sat on the small balcony of my new place, looking out at the quiet horizon. I poured a glass of something cold. No music, no noise, just the kind of silence that doesn't demand explanation. I'd lost a relationship. I'd gained freedom. Not because I'd walked away impulsively or because I was bitter, but because I had learned, finally, that love without truth is a performance. And I was done being part of someone else's rehearsal. She ran her test. I passed. And she disappeared first. The day her last message hit my inbox, something final settled in my chest. Not grief, not triumph, just quiet. Like a house after the guests have gone when the silence is no longer eerie, it's peaceful. I didn't reread the message. I didn't archive it. I just let it vanish. People asked later how I kept my composure, how I managed not to explode, not to lash out, not to chase some form of justice louder than her betrayal. I told them the truth. She never gave me honesty, so I stopped offering my energy. That was the real turning point, not when I found the hotel logs or the checklist, but the moment I realized how deeply she believed her performance deserved applause. She hadn't expected to be discovered. She expected to be forgiven, praised even for her transparency after the fact. She wanted the fallout to make her the victim, so I took the stage away. I stopped reacting. And in that void she finally saw herself, not framed through a lens of empathy but through the raw outline of her own decisions. I still remember her standing in the kitchen the week before she left for the last time. She was wearing that oversized sweater she used to claim was ours, even though it had always just been hers. She leaned against the counter and said, "It just feels like you don't need me anymore." I held her gaze. "I needed honesty. You gave me theater." She looked away first. She left that night quietly under the guise of solitude. I didn't ask where, she didn't offer. The locks changed the next morning. The building staff handed me her access badge and asked if I wanted to return it. I shook my head, said they could dispose of it. There was no note, no drama, no final plea. She faded like a story that forgot how to end. The truth is, there were good days, even in the middle of the mess. That's what makes betrayal sting harder, the knowledge that real moments existed inside a manufactured framework. But those moments weren't enough to excuse the architecture around them. She built a trust test expecting to be caught and rescued. She didn't plan for silence, didn't plan for a man who wouldn't play his part. And now, months later, when her name comes up, I don't feel anger. I feel distance. Earned, deliberate distance. Some endings come in flames. Ours ended in a closed door and the echo of footsteps that didn't turn back. And I wouldn't change a thing.